And we are back, and we are uncouth, and we are unwashed, and we are unprepared, kind of. It's your latest episode of ChRAWnology with me, David Thakura, and that guy over there. His name is Neil Trauma. Hi, Neil.
Hey, Dave. Hopefully we're not underwhelming. That's all I'm aiming for.
That's a very low bar, and I don't even know if we're going to make that.
I'm striving to whelm.
ChRAWnology, a episode-by-episode recap of WWF's Monday Night Raw, starting from episode 1. We are now on episode 4 from February 1st of 1993, with me being the casual, I can jump in and out wrestling fan, and Neil being the hardcore, knows where these guys went to high school wrestling fan. Overall, before we get into this, Neil, give us a little timestamp of a brief recap of where we are in wrestling. We're in the build-up to what pay-per-view, what happened at the last pay-per-view. Very brief.
We just polished off the Royal Rumble, which the last ChRAWnology episode we did was the show after the Royal Rumble. Yokozuna getting his big push to the title match at WrestleMania against world champion Bret Hart. Ric Flair has just left the promotion. He's lost to Mr. Perfect in a loser leaves town match. And if ever there was a show that underlined the fact that we are building to a pay-per-view, it was this one. Because if you were a fan of in-ring wrestling action, this was not the show for you. But everything at least built to WrestleMania. So I guess we'll get to each match when we get to it. But this is a WrestleMania build show 100%.
So slow, so much talking. In the real world, Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey was released in movie theaters, and we're in the aftermath of Super Bowl 27, where the Cowboys squashed the Buffalo Bills 52-17 at the Rose Bowl. Also, in the real wrestling world, Andre the Giant, Andrei Rene Rusnov, died this is the first Raw since we lost Andre, and we'll get to an Andre tribute a little bit later on. But let me ask you this. Do you know why they didn't start the show with that? Andre the Giant, not exactly a minor wrestler in the grand scheme of things. I found it hard to believe that this is the show and Andre just died and they didn't really tribute the man until midway through.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking two things as far as that goes. Number one, this is only the 4th episode of Raw ever. They haven't hit on the what would unfortunately become standard issue post major wrestler death show yet, because we haven't hit this, and don't worry, we will. If we continue ChRAWnology for the decades that we could conceivably continue it for, we're going to see a lot of shows with tributes to dead wrestlers on them. And now the standard thing is you open with the graphic and then you bring out the wrestlers for the 10 bell salute, and if it's a really, really big star, you do your tribute show with tribute matches. None of this had ever happened before, and to be quite honest with you, the fact that they even acknowledged it the way they did was a pretty major thing for 1993. Having the Fink go in the ring and do his thing, and we'll get to that when it happens at the midway point of the show, but it was actually, for their standards at the time, a pretty major tribute to Andre, especially considering the last time he had appeared on a major national wrestling show was with WCW, not even WWF. So knowing how petty they are, it's pretty amazing they did what they did.
Fair enough. But we did open the episode with something that I never expected to see. Action. Like, it was welcome to Monday Night Raw, and all of a sudden we're in the ring, and we're going to town with Tatanka and Damian Demento taking the match. No pause. Like, we're getting right into this. The first thing we hear was Tatanka's war cry.
I guess they wanted to give you the mistaken impression that this was going to be an exciting wrestling show.
That was a bad decision, because if they wanted to budget their time, I don't know if doing one of the 3 wrestling matches was the way to go about it, jumping into it right away. But that being said, it was Tatanka, it was Damian Demento, it was 2 characters from the 90s that would not have legs today. I guess we're still in the throes of everyone being obsessed with Dances with Wolves. I don't know if that's really what we're doing, but Damian Demento, I know nothing about him. Tell me about Damian Demento.
There's not really much to tell you there, Dave. Pretty much everything you know about Damian is all you need to know. He is a wrestler billed as being from, quote, the outer reaches of your mind. His gimmick is that he is, in fact, demented, and that's pretty much all there is to know. He came in, he got pushed for about a week or two, and then he proceeds to never win a match for a couple of months and is gone forever. In fact, I don't even know how many more times we see Damien Demento on Raw, but we've seen him get squashed by The Undertaker and squashed by Tatanka, and probably the less time spent on him, the better here. As we review the battle of the offensive Native American stereotype and the offensive mental illness stereotype. But hey, let me ask you this. When it comes to stereotypes, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this as a casual fan, because
Right.
as a longtime wrestling fan, I just accept certain things as being just the way it is in wrestling. But I've always felt like this Tatanka character, while it is absolutely a stereotype of a Native American, it just doesn't come across to me right now as anywhere near as offensive as what we saw last week with Kamala. Do you agree with that? Or are they just both things that we should just forever put into the back of our minds as, the way things used to be? Like, what's your opinion on that, Tatanka versus Kamala, as far as, the offensiveness meter goes?
No, you're right. Tatanka, while it is bad, especially viewed in today's lens, it was bad back then as well. I mean, 1993, that was the Atlanta Braves home run chop, right? That was Florida State Seminoles with a whole stadium doing the tomahawk chop. It's not that it's any less bad per se, but I feel like it is because Kamala is just there's no excuse for it now, then, whenever. There's no justification for having that as a gimmick. But I feel like a lot of people talk themselves into Tatanka being a character that paid tribute to as opposed to look down on. So if I'm going to rank them, and they're both bad, I'm not minimizing it. But if I'm going to rank them, Kamala is the clear number one. I can't believe that anyone thought this was a good idea anytime. And Tatanka was just yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that. Oh, well, let's move on.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of it too is that number one, Chris Chavis, who portrayed Tatanka, actually is Native American. So, I mean, he actually is paying tribute to his actual, history. And I
Right.
mean, I think in his mind, it very much was a positive tribute. And he's depicted as a strong warrior Native American who is at this point in time undefeated and, spoiler, getting a major push towards the Intercontinental Championship match at WrestleMania 9 here. Whereas Kamala is number one, not actually from Uganda, and number two, encouraging the fans to chant, "You are a man" at him as if there was some question about it beforehand.
Yeah, there's a clear okay, I kind of see the point, and a clear oh no, oh no no no, horrible idea. But Tatanka at the end did beat Damien Demento, and although it was a solid match, I really don't have anything else to say about it.
Well, I'll say one more thing just because it fits into what we're talking about right now, and I forgot it last week. We teased folks at the beginning of last week's show talking about Marty Jannetty, who had just lost to Shawn Michaels at the Royal Rumble, and then it totally slipped my mind to tell you the Marty Jannetty story. If you had seen the Royal Rumble match, and I don't know if people listening to this bothered to go back and watch the show, I know you didn't. It's kind of a wishy washy ending. Sensational Sherry's involved, there's interference. It was definitely meant to set up a bigger, better rematch. But unfortunately, as would happen so many times in Marty's career, his quote unquote personal demons struck, and Marty Jannetty was fired from the promotion. So they quickly had to switch gears and find Shawn Michaels a new challenger for WrestleMania. And this squash of Damien Demento would be the official start of Tatanka's push to get into that role. So that's why all of a sudden Marty is gone, and we're going to see a lot of Tatanka over the next 2 months on television, building towards WrestleMania. But hey, Dave, the next
Yeah.
segment on the show, your favorite thing, you actually got to see a clip of it. The
I
headlock on
can't
Hunger.
Much like I can't believe that the Marty Jannetty comes and goes, and I really if unless you reminded me about it, I really couldn't have told you that it was even a thing. I will never forget about Headlock on Hunger. I'm glad we got a resolution to this storyline as we got to see the WWF champ Bret the Hitman Hart walk down with a giant novelty check for $100,000 to the American Red Cross, and everyone gets a little weepy-eyed with, "Yay, WWF, they're doing good things for charity."
Hey, Dave, how much would you pay? What would you pay more for on eBay right now? That giant oversized check that Bret Hart had, or Macho Man Randy Savage's bedazzled Headlock on Hunger shirt?
Oh, easily the shirt. Easily the shirt. The check would just sort of be a novelty in my office, but I would wear the shirt It would be my first shirt out of the washing machine that I would come back with and wear. That was
I
a
might put in my
fabulous.
will to be buried in that shirt if possible.
That was an amazing shirt, and I'm glad Macho brought us such joy with that sartorial choice.
And I'm thinking this has to be it for Headlock on Hunger, so let's at least count our blessings. It could have been worse, Dave. They could have sent Kamala out there to accept the check on behalf of his people, but they didn't.
When we come back from commercial, we have Vince McMahon interviewing Brutus the Barber Beefcake in what I'm assuming is they're trying to build it up, but this segment was bad.
Yeah,
It was
this was brutal. You got me excited for a second there, though, Dave. When you said when we come back from commercial, I thought this show was throwing it to commercial. I thought you scored us an advertiser. I thought we had a sponsor, and I didn't know about it.
no, 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 no. Not
But
yet, but soon. I'm
yeah,
trying to
Brutus
talk my mom
Beefcake.
into it.
This Brutus Beefcake thing was pretty brutal. I mean, he sings his country. He basically sings a country tune about his mom dying, his wife leaving him, and then, as most country tunes end, getting his face broken into a million pieces by a parasailer.
That old story.
I mean, this is a true story,
All
by
of
the
these
way,
things
Dave.
happened?
Yes.
Wait, so
Well, I don't know. I don't know about the mom thing, and I don't know about the wife thing.
let's
But the
recap.
parasailing thing actually happened, where he was severely injured and near death from what's an absolute freak accident. A woman parasailing went out of control and actually smashed into Beefcake on a beach. That's a real story.
Unbelievable. I thought that was for sure was the one part of the story that was made up because again, if we're going to recap, Brutus the Barber in this interview says that he had cancer. He was involved in a paragliding accident. Both of his parents died, first his mom, then his dad from a broken heart, and then he really got divorced. But you're telling me that the paragliding thing actually happened.
The parasailing thing happened. For a second, I misheard this too, but I think if you go back and rewatch it, he doesn't have the cancer. I think his mom is the one with the cancer. He words it kind of weirdly in the interview. But Dave, you had said that you're amazed that of all the things to be true, or you said, could all these things be true? I'm going to tell you the one thing in this interview that was definitely not true. And that's the part where Brutus is near death and praying for the hand of God to come out of heaven and take him. And almost equally as powerful, the hand of Hulk Hogan comes down from heaven to save Brutus Beefcake's life with the power of Hulkamania.
That didn't happen? Come on.
I do not believe that that happened. No.
Okay. Well, now my whole childhood is ruined, but I'm going to pick myself up and carry on. The problem with this interview was everything about this interview. The bigger problem was that it was filmed in a smaller venue, still coming from the Manhattan Center, and it was a small crowd, and the microphones were there, and we picked up on every single comment coming out of the crowd. So when Brutus was saying things like, I thought about killing myself, someone from the crowd shouted, try again. It was pretty sad, but yeah, everything about this, from the crowd shots of the kids yawning to the storyline in general being an open challenge, none of it carried through. And
And it felt so out of place too, because when Monday Night Raw debuts, like, it really does feel like a switch was flipped from that old era of guys like Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. And you see it on these shows, like all those old guys are getting phased out. Like the Big Boss Man got totally squashed at the Royal Rumble, and I don't even know if we ever see him again. Like all those guys from the late 80s and early 90s are getting phased out, and these new guys are coming in. And then you trot out Brutus the Barber Beefcake with his stupid torn up pants and his stupid hedge clippers, and he just looks like an idiot out there. Then he tells this stupid story, and then the icing on the cake here, obviously they're building towards Hulk Hogan's return, and when he mentions Hulk Hogan, half the crowd
right,
boos.
it I don't know who planned it. I don't know if it was supposed to go completely off the rails the way that it did, but there was nothing redeeming about this segment to me, like, at all.
And there will be more on Brutus the Barber later in the show, so let's move on to our next match. And oh boy, what a humdinger this one was.
This is High Energy, the tag team of Coco Beware and Owen Hart, with a match over Iron Mike Sharp and Von Kruss. So you're going to have to fill me in on both of these guys.
Well, there's not much I can fill you in on Von Kruss, I don't think. But I mean, Iron Mike Sharp's been around forever. Longtime Northeast jobber. He shows up on all these WWF shows in the Northeast in this era, always losing. I think he died very recently. He was one of those guys that they always treated him a little bit better than your typical no-name jobber. Like, he always got in a little more offense, and like, he had a nickname. At least he was Iron Mike Sharp and not just Mike Sharp. But yeah, he is the quintessential WWF jobber of the 80s and early 90s. And he doesn't last too long in there with the team of High Energy, who's apparently going to break up soon if you read the Observers at the time. And I don't think anything ever comes to that story. But anyway,
It was
let's
a
move
very
on.
fast match, a very high energy match. It didn't really last all that long, and probably
And I'm
for the
pretty sure I spent more time talking about Iron Mike Sharp than the match itself actually lasted.
better. That was absolutely true. But we get to our headline event, I guess, because it's not really the final match, but it's the
Well,
one that was teased last week, and it's
we,
the one they've been building to. So we enter the phase of Doink the Clown taking on Typhoon.
we go to the announce desk and you get Vince McMahon here. He is giddy about this match for some reason, just like he was last week. Like, now the match we've been waiting for. No, Vince, only you have been waiting for this match. Doink the Clown versus Typhoon. And at least it was basically over pretty quickly. I mean,
Was it though? Because to me, it just dragged on with very slow moves and very bad choreography. This match took so much time. I had a chance to go to his Wikipedia page and look up all of the Typhoon nicknames. Would you like to hear some highlights of Typhoon's
please,
career?
please.
And I'm going to try to do this all in one breath, okay? He was Big Bubba, Big Man Steel, Big Steel Man, Bubba the Belt Collector, the Shockmaster, Siegfried the Giant, Sugar Daddy, Super Shockmaster, Superstar Bubba, Tugboat, Tugboat Thomas, Tugboat Tyler, Typhoon, and he had ended his career being U.S. Steel, because apparently the Carnegie family was not in a litigious frame of mind and didn't want to sue him. I didn't know that his career was that long to have all of these gimmicks and have all of these nicknames.
Dave, do you know who the Shockmaster is?
No.
This is a moment that's going to make me absolutely giddy. Now, a lot of listeners to this podcast are going to know this story, but because you don't, and because I know that there are going to be newer fans out there that don't know this story, this is my opportunity to tell it. I believe this would have been after this show took place. This would have been later on in his career. Fred Ottman, real name of Mr. Typhoon, heads to WCW, and he's going to be revealed as the big mystery teammate of Sting and a bunch of the other big baby faces going into what I believe was a War Games match. Now, you'll have to forgive me if I'm getting some of the details wrong, listeners, because I was a WWF guy, not a WCW guy at this time. But they had a major debut planned for the Shockmaster, which he was going to burst through a wall like the Kool-Aid Man. And he is all ready with his new outfit, which was literally a Star Wars stormtrooper helmet spray painted with glittery paint. And he was going to bust through this wall. And he does it. And God bless him, but the big son of a bitch tripped on the wall, face planted on the concrete,
Oh, no.
lost his helmet. This all happened on live television, and he was basically never seen or heard from again.
Oh,
So that
no.
is the lasting moment of Typhoon's career, being the Shockmaster in WCW, to which I will add one more thing, because I know you as well as I am a big fan of Jeopardy. He was once named by Ken Jennings, interim host of Jeopardy, as his all-time favorite wrestler, because he was a man named Tugboat Thomas who came out and pretended to be an actual tugboat going toot toot on the way to the ring.
There's nothing about that last few minutes of my life that I don't like. I'm so glad that we're here for this. Thank you for that.
And well, we've certainly got more out of that match than anyone should have. So let's just move on in this show. And when this match ended, Dave, I know you said you thought it was obscenely long, but when this
No,
match
I didn't
ended,
say it
I
was
thought,
long.
all
I
right.
said it seemed long.
I was like, there was the main event. And I knew based on the little status bar that the WWE Network has that there was still the Andre the Giant tribute coming up. So I figured, all right, they're going to end the show with Andre. This should be pretty nice. That then it was like, wow, that Raw went by really quick. And then I looked down, and there's like 20 minutes left on the timer. Like, what is about to happen?
20 minutes of actual time, about 3.5 minutes of actual content.
And about 3.5 hours of my life that I felt going away as we did this. I mean, first, actually, we hit up a guy who should actually be a hero to you and I, Dave, Mr. Todd Pettingil. And he should be a hero to us because he was, and I believe still is, a New York radio morning show host who got the gig to just come in and be the WWF shill guy. I mean, he's eventually going to replace your hero, Mean Gene Okerlund, in that role of doing like the event center stuff, but he hosts WWF Mania. He's around for a couple of years, quintessential WWF new generation guy, Todd Pettingil.
I actually didn't
What did
mind it.
we?
Vince talks to Todd. Hey, Todd, what do you got coming up for us on Saturday morning? And it was a pretty compelling interview about, well, I'm going to bring you everything you need to know about Giant Gonzalez, which I think we both have established that we're not fans of the Giant Gonzalez angle at all, or character or
Nobody
guy.
is.
But he made it seem like it's something I should wake up early for on Saturday morning.
Oh, he was an awesome, awesome shill, was Todd Pettingil. I think you're going to really appreciate Todd Pettingil as we move through these shows. I mean, he is an outstanding dweeb and just so perfect in his role. However, I will say this right now that I do forever hate Todd Pettingil for one reason. When Todd Pettingil was leaving the WWF in 1997, spoiler alert, he suggested a colleague of his to replace him in his job.
Okay.
And this man was hired, Mr. Michael Cole.
You don't like Michael Cole?
So if you hate Michael Cole,
Okay.
you have Todd Pettingil to blame. But thankfully, we don't have to deal with that until 1997, which, if I can do math in my head, is going to be 2025 by the time we're at this point in the podcast. So let's not worry about it today.
Let's write it down and come back to it in a few years.
Yeah, we'll put it at the top of our Google Doc. But anyway, Andre the Giant has passed away. He's eulogized quickly by Howard Finkel. They do the 10-bell salute. They do a little photo montage, and it's actually it's a pretty fitting tribute, I guess. It's a pretty nice tribute to Andre the Giant.
If it's the first
Certainly,
time,
if he died today, he would have got a completely blow away video package and all that. But they didn't do that in 1993, and it was nice that they did this.
for the first time out of the box, if this is the first tribute, on-air tribute they did for a wrestler, I thought they did a pretty good job. Not, again, they didn't dedicate the whole show to him, but for what it was pretty good. And when we came back from that, we get a Raw ring girl, which this happened the first few episodes. I don't know how long it carries on, but the inner preteen and teenager in me watching basic cable in the early 90s, boy, it was pretty close to watching porn to see a girl walking around the ring in a bikini like that with a cameraman, let's just say, taking some creative license with what shots he was putting on the air at that exact moment.
Yeah, that was a pretty modern, let's say,
Yeah.
swimsuit on that girl. Like that girl would not be out of place on Raw today. I mean, she would be because they don't put girls in their bathing suits out there in the ring, but she would not be out of place in 2021. And I do have to ask myself, however, why you have this Raw girl on TV, but then it's minutes later that they decide to break out the, through the legs looking up at your ass shot, and it's of Yokozuna instead.
I guess they wanted to do equal opportunity looking at butt shots with men
Yeah.
and women. That's the only possible reason. Yeah, probably not. The next match, as you referred to, Yokozuna taking on Bobby DeVito. And if you know anything about wrestling, you know who won the match, so we're not going to concentrate on that. But to me, the best part of this match was the broadcasters not really being on the same page. Rob Bartlett, personal favorite of the show, he was trying to recap the Royal Rumble with the Macho Man with a little back and forth, and Rob chiming in saying, yeah, Macho, hey, you were the last one in the Royal Rumble with Yokozuna, who was the winner, but you did a good job. You knocked him off his feet. You were the first one. Very quickly followed by Vince McMahon saying, no, I don't believe so. I don't believe anyone has done that before. And then most of the next few minutes was spent about building up Yokozuna into this behemoth who's never been taken off of his feet before. Who screwed up, Neil? How did that happen?
Well, how about this? I'm tell you, I'm most amazed by the fact that apparently Rob Bartlett actually watched the Royal Rumble, and equally amazed because apparently Vince McMahon didn't. Because yes, Macho Man did knock Yokozuna off of his feet in that Royal Rumble match, and pretty famously, the finish of the match is Macho knocking Yokozuna down, going up to do his flying elbow smash. He hits the elbow smash, which Yokozuna no sells and flings Macho Man off of his chest and over the top rope for his elimination. Yokozuna literally wins the match while lying on his back. So Vince McMahon lying through his teeth here. But who would ever let the truth get in the way of a good wrestling storyline, right, Vince?
That is true. Most of this match was the time dedicated to these two characters, and the match was dedicated to Yokozuna's entrance. The match itself came and went in typical Yokozuna fashion, but we spent a bizarre amount of time trying to get telephones to work during this match.
Yeah, we were trying to call Hacksaw Jim Duggan on the phone. Apparently, Hacksaw doesn't know how to use a phone. He eventually figures it out, and he is hyping up his match with Yokozuna, which, considering the fact that Yokozuna is going to go on to challenge Bret Hart at WrestleMania, I don't think we should be all that shocked when we find out who wins the Yokozuna Hacksaw Duggan match. But yeah, they're building this up. I think they had either a match or a showdown in the build up to the Royal Rumble before Raw started, so we didn't see it on Raw. But Yokozuna squashed Duggan and he gave him the Banzai drop and with something with the American flag. So that's why they've got this kind of blood feud going. And we will eventually see Hacksaw, but I don't know if the Hacksaw Yoko match is on Raw or not. I think it's not. So if you're looking forward to that, I'll have to refer you to WWF Superstars on the network.
After this, we get the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, walking into an interview with the Money Incorporated tag team, Million Dollar Man and IRS, both of them trying to outwit each other into getting Brutus the Barber Beefcake in a match. Again, more talking, building up a future event. Neither one of these guys
Yeah,
deserves that much mic time.
nah, I mean, this is all. I mean, once again, spoiler. This is building up a main event match at WrestleMania. You'll see how they get there and what the match ends up being. But yeah, this all just feels so out of place and so out of nowhere. Why is Brutus Beefcake back? First of all, with no build.
Mhm.
Note, last week they cared enough to promote the Doink Typhoon match, but not enough to promote that Brutus Beefcake was coming back after a year away from the show. And then when they bring him back seemingly out of nowhere, suddenly he's feuding with the tag champs and name dropping Hulk Hogan. And now out of nowhere, Jimmy Hart is on the outs with Money Inc. This is not a good build. As a kid, I know where this ends up, and I always wondered how they got there, and it turns out it ain't all that good.
As we've been saying a lot about this episode, and the less said about that, the better. So let's move on to one of the highlights of the actual episode. Mr. Perfect in a pre-cut video montage with some guy from the Minnesota Vikings. I forget his name. He was a tight end, probably pretty good. But Mr. Perfect on a football field throwing balls around.
Yeah, I mean, if Kamala and Tatanka is the worst of early '90s pro wrestling, Mr. Perfect is like the best. I love these preposterous videos where it's so fake. He throws the ball in the air. It's like dramatic chariots of fire shots of him running, and
Dun,
he's
dun,
huffing and
dun, dun,
puffing,
dun,
and the
dun,
ball is
dun,
flying through the air for what seems like a half an
dun,
hour,
dun,
and then
dun, dun.
finally Mr. Perfect gets under there and catches his own touchdown pass. So stupid and so awesome. I loved it.
Have we, now that I've seen him throw a football, have we seen Mr. Perfect and Boomer Esiason in the same exact room at the same time? I don't think so. He
I never have.
he was chucking it around pretty good. I'm just gonna say it. Mr. Perfect and Boomer Esiason separated at birth. But after that pre-cut montage was done, we get to what I guess was the main event of the night with the narcissist
Oh yeah.
Lex Luger coming out in one of those after marathon foil baked potato wrappers, taking on somebody named Jason Knight. In again, the crowd's been there for a while. They pretty much know who's going to win the match, and thankfully it was brief and pretty, pretty concise.
Yeah, narcissist Lex Luger, no trouble knocking out Jason Knight. Pins him with one finger, which is always a great heel move. And yes, that is the Jason Knight of future ECW Television Championship fame. And that wraps up this Raw. I had a feeling going into this, recording this podcast, Dave, that we were either going to have nothing to say about this show and be done in like 10 minutes, or we were going to have a ton to say about this show. And we've literally talked about this show for over a half an hour at this point, which is more time than the show had gone on for when it hit the point when I thought it must be over in real life.
It wasn't a great episode. That being said, there were still some highlights. Neil, who's your MVP this week?
You know what? For as much as we ragged on the angle, I am going to give it to Ted DiBiase because he did a good job with the promo, talking down Brutus Beefcake and speaking up for. He was actually coming out speaking up for the locker room, saying that they were all disrespected by Beefcake, which is actually kind of true since this knucklehead's been off for 2 years and he's coming back for a WrestleMania main event match. And I'm going to go with Ted DiBiase as my MVP of the show because everything else was pretty mediocre in my opinion.
But because it was so mediocre, my MVP plays into that. I thought it was Macho Man. I thought Macho as a broadcaster, week one, I was iffy on it, but now he's there. He's, to me, the highlight of the show. There's not a lot happening in the ring. There's a whole lot of talking, that not a lot of good action. And I thought Macho did his part to carry the show along. I thought he did a great job this week. So Macho Man is my MVP. Ooh, yeah.
I can't argue with that. And how about this, Dave? We get a week off.
Yay!
No Raw next week for the Dog Show on USA. That would be a February tradition for many years. So.
This would actually piss me off during the Attitude Era when I'd tune in and I'd see the Westminster Kennel Club show and I'd be like, oh, come on, man. I went Raw. But I guess that was how it just happened on TV. Dogs get more screen time than our boy, the $1 Million Man.
At least in 1993, anyway. So we'll be back on the podcast in 2 weeks with the next edition of Raw that's going to feature a battle royal where they tease us that Rob Bartlett might participate. So I'll tell you, if there's anything that's going to get me to tune into Raw, it's not Typhoon versus Doink, but it certainly is 15 wrestlers beating the crap out of Rob Bartlett.
I'm there. And we will bring it to you live, recorded, on ChRAWnology, an episode-by-episode recap of WWF's Monday Night Raw with me, Dave Thakura, and him, Neil Trauma.
Take it easy.